Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello, good morning. Quieter conditions as far as the weather's concerned today compared to the last few days. Lighter winds and brighter skies expected in many places. But there will be more rain coming along later associated with these weather fronts. Now, these are moving in from the west by the end of Thursday, but this is the last of Storm Barra, this occluded front, which is bringing an area of cloud and some showers during the morning to much of northern and eastern UK. The showers tending to fizzle out, the cloud moving into the North Sea by the afternoon, so that, well, actually, plenty of sunny skies then start to emerge across central and eventually eastern parts of the country into the afternoon. Whilst further west, a bright start, but cloud and rain push in here from the west, and some milder air, 12 Celsius in the southwest, whilst 6 or 7 is about as high as it will get further east. The cloud and rain in the west will move east, affecting many places during the evening, an hour or two of wet weather before eventually overnight pushing into the North Sea. That's then replaced by clear spells, but also blustery showers, especially in the west and the northwest. And those showers will be on the heavy side around coasts especially. Temperatures dipping to 3 or 4 Celsius generally, with enough of a breeze to prevent a widespread frost, but perhaps a touch of frost in some sheltered spots first thing, particularly in the east where we'll get some clear skies and some sunshine during Friday morning. And actually, it's looking like a decent day in the east with plenty of sunny skies for the Midlands, East Anglia, South East England, North East England and Eastern Scotland. Elsewhere, quite a few showers moving through. Hail and thunder mixed in with some of those heavier downpours, especially earlier in the day, and it'll feel cold with a blustery breeze. Into Saturday, and it's a frosty start for many of us, but a bright start before cloud and rain work across the country later on. On Sunday, it's damp in the south, but mild, drier and brighter further north.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Good morning, you're watching To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Moroki and Patrick Christies, and we've got another show full of all of today's big stories and lots of discussion as well and opinion on the issues that matter to you. So here's what's coming up.
Yes, well, Prime Minister Boris Johnson has triggered COVID Plan B restrictions in England in an attempt to combat the spread of the Omicron variant so we can enjoy a, quote, close to normal festive period. This means masks in most public places, COVID passes for some venues and work from home guidance. We'll bring you up to speed on those latest latest rules shortly.
Yes, and just hours before that, former Number 10 Press Secretary Allegra Stratton resigned in tears following a video that emerged appearing to show her making light of a party last Christmas at Number 10 that took place when they were not allowed under COVID restrictions. Is the Prime Minister now on borrowed time? Well, we'll be discussing that throughout the show.
We will indeed. New Zealand is banning young people from ever being allowed to buy cigarettes, apparently, aiming to make the country smoke-free by 2025. Is it right to ban people from ever being allowed to buy a cigarette? Let us know what you think.
Yes, we've got all of that coming up and much more as well across the programme. We'll be here with you until midday as usual, and remember to get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk. But first, Patrick gives his views on the new COVID rules.
I don't care that Boris Johnson may have had a party in Downing Street. I don't care that it may not have been socially distanced. I don't care that potentially COVID rules were broken. I don't really think they should have been in place to begin with, personally. What I do care about is the fact that people died alone in hospital beds, unable to hold their loved ones' hands in their final moments. I do care that people weren't allowed to hug their mum at their father's funeral. I do care that people had to cancel their weddings. I do care about record NHS waiting lists. I do care about children missing out on education. I care about the fact that children are developing crippling mental health issues. I do care about a weakened economy and the fact that my future children will still be paying for that in higher taxes. And this is the problem, isn't it? Boris Johnson was the man inflicting all of this on us. He says he was following the science, and OK, all right, but ultimately it's his name above the door. Now, I'm not calling for him to go, but I do find it very difficult to see how he can stay, especially in light of yesterday's announcement and the fact that, unequivocally, the government is no longer following the science when it comes to COVID. The Plan B restrictions include people being told to work from home in England from Monday, if possible. Face masks will be made compulsory in most public indoor venues, including in cinemas and theatres from this Friday. They will not be required in pubs, though, restaurants and gyms. Vaccine passports will be compulsory to gain access to nightclubs and other large venues where large crowds gather. This will apply to all unseated indoor venues with more than 500 people, unseated outdoor venues with more than 4,000 people, and any venue with more than 10,000 people. 2 vaccine doses will be treated as fully vaccinated, but this will be kept under review because of the booster programme. And I think it's pretty obvious that we're going to end up constantly moving the goalposts on what the definition of fully vaccinated is. I can see a future where people who haven't had their 25th jab are stigmatised and vilified and told that they're killing people with their selfish behaviour. Those who come into contact with someone who tests positive for Omicron will have to take a test every single day. And all in all, economists are now warning that this could cost our economy £4 billion a month. But most concerningly, Boris Johnson raised the potential that vaccines could become mandatory. And we just can't have this. This has all started in Europe, and this country has risen up in the past and defeated dangerous authoritarianism from the continent. We can't succumb to it now. All for a strain of the virus that is spreading rapidly, yes, but from a very low base, that hasn't, as far as I'm aware, killed anyone yet, doesn't appear to be dangerously resistant to the vaccine, and that appears to have relatively mild symptoms. Like I said, I don't really care about Boris Johnson's alleged party, but I do think that it means he now has zero credibility when it comes to asking us to follow additional restrictions. Why should any of us adhere to Boris Johnson's increased restrictions when it's clear that those around him, those close to him, during the middle of our winter of discontent, thought that the rules that they made us all live under were laughable?
Yeah, I think it's emerged as well now, hasn't it, in this morning's papers, that there was actually, they've admitted to another party that was held at Conservative Party HQ. I believe people got so drunk, a door was smashed or something, I don't know. But I think with the new rules, I find it really ironic that Boris Johnson has effectively said, have your Christmas parties, but please work from home because it's not safe to be in the office. And I saw a comment from somebody saying last year you had to pretend you were going to work if you wanted to have a Christmas party, and this year you have to pretend you're having a Christmas party if you actually do want to go into work. It just doesn't make sense, this idea that certain things are safe to be at, but work somehow isn't. It just doesn't make sense whatsoever. And as you say, I think that his credibility is completely gone, at least in terms of trying to convince people to follow the rules. I know I've seen a very small minority of people saying they will continue to adhere to the rules now that all of this has happened. Many people are just fed up and saying it doesn't make sense in light of Omicron, and actually I think I'm being taken the mickey out of, and I won't do it. That's what a lot of people are saying.
Well, that's right. I mean, if they were coming out and saying essentially that Delta is still about, Delta is still deemed to be much more dangerous as far as we know than Omicron, and we were doing this for that, then I think more people would be inclined to go along with it. I do think that now there has been a big shift in public reaction just to these rules and regs. And I do think, look, that what happened or may not have happened at this party in Downing Street, I think will have an impact on public compliance with the rules. Now, personally, again, I'm coming from a standpoint where I don't really care about the fact that Boris Johnson or those around him or whatever may have had a party. I certainly don't actually really want these new increased restrictions and these rules. So am I that bothered personally whether or not people sit there and actually comply with them? Well, OK, I suppose you have to because it's the rules, isn't it? But I'm not that bothered about that. But I do think that just from a practical point, Boris Johnson is going to really struggle now to have any credibility whatsoever when it comes to telling us to do stuff. Really.
Yes, indeed. And we'd like to hear your views, as usual, on this and anything else. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Our inbox was pretty split yesterday on the issue of whether it mattered that Boris Johnson had Downing Street, number 10, had a party. Obviously, new details have since come to light. Allegra Stratton has resigned. There's been new information about another party. So have you changed your mind? Let us know, gbviews@gbnews.uk. But after the break, we'll be talking to the group that first proposed vaccine passports and putting to them why they believed it was the right way forward and whether it's right to impose vaccine passports on those that choose not to have them. We'll be back in a bit.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Now, we've been discussing the developments with the new COVID rules this morning, and part of Boris Johnson's Plan B restrictions include COVID-19 vaccine passports for large indoor and outdoor gatherings in England. That's from the 15th of December. And the vaccine passport scheme has already been introduced in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, but has been met with backlash from some in the hospitality industry.
Yes, indeed. Well, leaders in the industry say the scheme will likely cause conflict between staff and customers, reduce trade and affect the hiring of staff during a time of national staff shortages. But we're joined now by Chris Southworth, the Secretary-General of the International Chamber of Commerce. The ICC first put forward, actually, the idea of vaccine passports. Thank you very much for joining us. Initially, I think it was seen, wasn't it, as a way for us to get back to normal, really, and get out of this pandemic and keep the wheels of business turning. Do you still feel like that's the right thing now, especially with things like mandatory vaccinations coming in? Do you think it's gone a bit far?
In terms of vaccine passports?
Yes.
I mean, we advocated very strongly at the beginning, and still do, that we need vaccine passports in order to maintain international travel. And that's no different, by the way, to having, yellow fever vaccinations if you're going into a yellow fever zone. The precedent is already there. What we are advocating for is, safe travel for international business, business travelers in particular, but also for the travel industry more widely. I think, what's infuriating at the moment is we're all here talking about a number 10 Christmas party when what we should be talking about is vaccinating the world. And just, by the way, looking at the numbers, if it's going to cost us $4 billion $4 billion a month in terms of economic disruption, the vaccine gap, funding gap, is $16 billion. So within 4 months, we could have actually, for the same cost, vaccinated the whole world. To put that in context, but particularly in places like Africa, where vaccine rates are very low. But until we get to a place where those vaccine rates worldwide are higher than the current 40%, and certainly higher than the sort of 2 to 3% in places like Africa, we're going to have this constant, endless disruption to our own economy. And that's just completely unsustainable. So that's the infuriating point. We're being distracted when we should be talking about
Sure,
big
yeah.
picture.
Yeah. And I appreciate you are the International Chamber of Commerce, so you are taking that international perspective. But lots of people will be waking up today with the new rules imposed here and will be concerned about what's going on here in Britain. Do you think vaccine passports have become quite controversial? And we do have a very high vaccination rate, don't we, here? I think 8 in 10 eligible adults or something like that have been double jabbed. So what exactly is the purpose, the science behind how effective vaccine passports are? And I'm talking here about domestic vaccine passports.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the case of international travel or cross-border movement, I think there's a very strong case for vaccine passports, and there's already precedents, like I say. I think it starts to get into a very grey zone when you're talking about people's personal spaces and environments. There's an element of common sense. If you're in public spaces that are busy, then the sort of common sense approach would be to wear a mask to protect yourself, protect your family, protect the people around you in your own communities. That sort of makes sense. But I think it does need a lot more debate, because when you start to impose that on people's personal lives, then obviously it starts to infringe on this civil liberties issue, and that obviously needs a lot more public debate. From a business point of view, I think it's quite straightforward. Business confidence, by the way, in key sectors like hospitality is already at ground zero, has been for a long time. We cannot drive growth, jobs, investment until we have that certainty and consistency. So if you're in the hospitality sector, you must be sitting there with your head in your hands right now, because this is devastating. At the busiest period of time, you're just trying to get your businesses up and running after a long period. And here we are now putting restrictions back in place. The point is this is avoidable. That's my point, is guess where this Omicron has come from? It's come from the least vaccinated part of the world in Africa. We could have solved that problem a year ago at least. So, yes, it's a domestic problem, but it's not, you can't disconnect that from the global challenge. That until we get everybody vaccinated, we can't get on with our lives. That's the point around the domestic conversation. So we can't have just be looking at what we're doing within the UK. We've got to look at it, in a much wider perspective, and then solve the fundamentals, because ultimately that will lead us out to some sort of normality in terms of economic growth on a sustainable basis.
Yeah, look, absolutely, and I do completely understand what you're saying. I'm just going to put the other side of it, really, which is that a lot of people would say that creating vaccine passports, etc., has the potential to create a two-tier society, and maybe in some sense a two-tier world as well, because if you can't travel without them, then I suppose that's a restriction on people's lives, and that can be seen to potentially be an infringement on people's civil liberties, can't it? And potentially their bodily autonomy if they then go and feel like really they have to go and get a vaccine in order to function, right? So is that a concern for you? Are you concerned that that's a knock-on effect of these vaccine passport proposals?
Yeah, absolutely, because until we get to a place where we can operate safely and we can operate in a consistent environment, it has a direct impact on the economy. And those numbers are big. 4 billion a month, that adds up. We've already seen an enormous economic impact. You mentioned it yourself that, our children are going to be paying for this for years to come. So, this will go on and on and on until we deal with the problem. That's the key. And I think around the civil liberties issue, it needs an awful lot more public debate as to where people feel comfortable, what they're prepared to accept. But ultimately, it boils down to personal responsibility, doesn't it? To be sensible, responsible, and be safe so that we don't have deaths or hospitalizations. And keep those around us, healthy and with, a good sense of well-being.
Yeah, and I think that's good advice to end on. Thank you, Chris Southworth, the Secretary General there of the International Chamber of Commerce.
Yes, indeed. Well, where are you on the old vaccine passport issue? I know a lot of people feel very, very strongly for it. I certainly am. I'm not personally banging in favour of it, but I can see the sign from an international business perspective why they would want to call for it. But there we go. Anyway, well, to talk about the potential impact of Plan B and lockdowns more generally, it's Dr. Joe Hemmings, behavioural psychologist. Thank you so much, Joe. Great to have you on the show. Now, look, we're fronting up, it appears now, to more potential restrictions. The working from home, for example, being a key one. Will there be a lot of people this morning waking up thinking, oh, gosh, no, I'm going to be locked down away again, and the mental health issues that can come with that?
Yeah, there are mental health issues with it. We know, we've seen it. We've had it now for nearly 2 years, so we're very well aware of the impact that it has. I mean, I suppose we're already in Plan B light. We've gone further into Plan B, and people are really weary. They're resentful, I imagine, of some of the restrictions that are now being imposed. And, anxiety levels, once again, because of this Omicron variant, will be higher.
And do you think the government's doing enough to acknowledge the impact the previous lockdowns have had and the impact any future restrictions are going to have? Because I personally haven't really seen a government minister or government representative actually highlighting very strongly, in strong terms, the absolute damage this has done to people's mental well-being.
Yeah, it has done damage to people's mental well-being, but also there is another side of this. The flip side of this is that when restrictions are imposed or regulations are imposed, that some people actually feel more settled because it feels like the government is back in control of what's going on, and so they're being given their information and they know what to do. I think the real problem at the moment is, I suppose, what we call the issue of compliance. I don't even like the word compliance because a lot of people will be thinking, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to take these restrictions on board. Boris needs to go, needs to be accountable for that party. And in fact, what we're doing by, say you threw away your mask, I'm not doing what he says. I mean, unfortunately, that may have an impact on your health, your safety, other people's. It's going to overwhelm the NHS if we all decide we're not going to be compliant with Boris. So I think we're at a stage now where we just have to make a decision for ourselves. What do we feel comfortable with? What do we want to do? And it's not about compliance, it's about safety.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can get depressed and can get anxious and can develop mental health problems when they're economically insecure. And one of the things that seems to be happening now, potentially, with these new restrictions is, according to economic experts, could take 4 billion off our economy every single month. That's going to filter its way down and hit the little people at some point, isn't it, as it were? Is this going to be an issue for us? Is the financial security, potentially the employment insecurity, actually going to be another unintended consequence of our lockdowns or of our restrictions, I should say?
Yes, once again, there is a lot of insecurity, whether that's about your job, whether that's coming from people who work in the hospitality sector, whether that's coming from anxiety over what is this? We don't really know. What is this Omicron variant going to do to us? Lockdowns are not great. If this is where we are, and everybody, I think, anticipates that, the follow-on from Plan B is Plan C, which is lockdown. Now, you want to do everything to avoid that, but it's there looming like a cloud in early January. And I really fear for people. If we're going to lock down, I fear for the economy over something which, to all intents and purposes, feels incredibly mild. We're going to have to just let it go through society, get a couple of days not feeling well, that's okay. But it's ridiculous to be locking down, to me, over a variant which there's no evidence that it kills anybody. Absolutely. But it does affect mental health.
Yeah, and I think your sentiments there are shared by a lot of people this morning. Thank you, Dr. Jo Hemmings, for joining us to talk about that. Well, keep all your thoughts coming into us as well on email, gbviews@gbnews.uk. We'll be getting to those very shortly, and we'll be back with more of today's top stories as well after this short break.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello, good morning. Quieter conditions as far as the weather's concerned today compared to the last few days. Lighter winds and brighter skies expected in many places, but there will be more rain coming along later associated with these weather fronts. Now, these are moving in from the west by the end of Thursday, but this is the last of Storm Barra, this occluded front, which is bringing an area of cloud and some showers during the morning to much of northern and eastern UK. The showers tending to fizzle out, the cloud moving into the North Sea by the afternoon, so that, well, actually, plenty of sunny skies then start to emerge across central and eventually eastern parts of the country into the afternoon. Whilst further west, a bright start, but cloud and rain push in here from the west, and some milder air, 12 Celsius in the southwest, whilst 6 or 7 is about as high as it will get further east. The cloud and rain in the west will move east, affecting many places during the evening, an hour or two of wet weather before eventually overnight pushing into the North Sea. That's then replaced by clear spells, but also blustery showers, especially in the west and the northwest. And those showers will be on the heavy side around coasts especially. Temperatures dipping to 3 or 4 Celsius generally, with enough of a breeze to prevent a widespread frost, but perhaps a touch of frost in some sheltered spots first thing, particularly in the east where we'll get some clear skies and some sunshine during Friday morning. And actually, it's looking like a decent day in the east with plenty of sunny skies for the Midlands, East Anglia, South East England, North East England and Eastern Scotland. Elsewhere, quite a few showers moving through. Hail and thunder mixed in with some of those heavier downpours, especially earlier in the day, and it'll feel cold with a blustery breeze. Into Saturday, and it's a frosty start for many of us, but a bright start before cloud and rain work across the country later on. On Sunday, it's damp in the south, but mild, drier and brighter further north.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
I'm Olivia Guthrie. This is your news at 10 o'clock. Boris Johnson is facing a revolt from Tory backbenchers who are questioning the government's credibility in enforcing England's Plan B COVID rules. The backlash from the Prime Minister's party comes amid allegations of a Downing Street Christmas party last year. New rules include extending mandatory masks to indoor public venues such as cinemas and theatres, and guidance to work from home where possible will return on Monday. Mr Johnson has denied bringing forward announcements to divert attention from the row.
Just as the 1922 committee, way back in the 1990s, saw Margaret Thatcher, we never thought that the Iron Lady would ever be forced to resign from the premiership, but she was. So basically, we're in a situation here, even though Boris has a massive Commons majority, at some point or other, the backbenchers' rebellion could be at such a stage that the Tory party decides there's only one way forward, and that's replace the leader.
Meanwhile, business owners have been responding to the introduction of tougher restrictions.
Here is our party season where we earn most of our money to carry us through our dark times of January and February. And at the moment, we can see cancellations of events and bookings that are already coming in. And we are now thinking, are we going to take enough money to survive?
Well, the government's Christmas party row continues after it was alleged a second event was held at Conservative HQ last December. According to the Times newspaper, the event took place while the capital was under Tier 2 restrictions. It comes after a leaked video showing Number 10 staff laughing about restrictions following an alleged Downing Street party, which forced the resignation of government aide Allegra Stratton. Dominic Raab is self-isolating after coming into contact with Australia's Deputy Prime Minister, who's since tested positive for coronavirus. Barnaby Joyce confirmed he tested positive while travelling in Washington, D.C. A spokeswoman for Mr Raab said he was getting tested. Scottish Conservative leader Douglas Ross is also self-isolating after a member of staff tested positive. The Scottish budget will be unveiled at Holyrood later, with the Finance Secretary saying it will provide stability and support. Kate Forbes will outline her draft tax and spending plans for next year and 2023 to MSPs in the first budget to be put forward jointly by the SNP and Scottish Greens. But the Scottish Conservatives say spending must support hard-pressed businesses by providing firms in the leisure, hospitality, retail and newspaper sectors with a 75% rates rebate. New government plans could see prosecutors meet the victims of crime before making charging decisions. The Ministry of Justice has launched a consultation into reforms which Justice Secretary Dominic Raab says will give victims a louder voice. The proposals could also see whole neighbourhoods being asked how antisocial behaviour has affected their area. Meanwhile, the minimum victim surcharge could also be raised to £100. Cancer patients should be able to check whether they're eligible for clinical trials, experts have said. The Institute of Cancer Research has suggested patients and doctors should be able to self-refer following a 60% drop in recruitment during COVID. Nearly 1 in 4 people celebrating Christmas will struggle to afford it this year. That's according to research from a national debt charity. Step Change found that 1 in 12 will borrow to pay for festive spending, with a quarter taking a year or more to pay the money back. Those who are borrowing say rising household costs, reduced income and the recent loss of the temporary uplift to universal credit are among the reasons. The aircraft carrier HMS Queen Elizabeth is returning home today following the loss of a £100 million fighter jet at sea. The Royal Navy flagship had originally been expected to return to Portsmouth tomorrow, but that was brought forward due to concerns about the weather. In November, an F-35B Lightning jet crashed into the Mediterranean after tumbling off the flight deck. The jet's pilot escaped unharmed. A member of the carrier's crew has been arrested on suspicion of leaking video footage of the incident. You're right up to date. I'll have the headlines for you in half an hour. Now it's back to the point.
Good morning, everybody. You're watching To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christys, and Mercy Moroki. We've got a show full of all of today's biggest stories and lots of discussions to get you going.
Yes, here's what's on the menu. Just hours after former Number 10 Press Secretary Allegra Stratton resigned in tears over apparently making light of a Number 10 party last Christmas, Prime Minister Boris Johnson has triggered COVID Plan B restrictions in England. We'll be updating you on what Plan B means for you and discussing the Prime Minister's credibility on leading the war against COVID throughout the show.
Yes, and as well, it looks like Boris Johnson's had a busy time of it in more ways than one, but we'll come to that shortly. A picture of Ghislaine Maxwell sitting with convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein at the Queen's residence in Balmoral has been shown in her trial. We'll discuss the latest development in what many have called the trial of the century.
Yes, and New Zealand is banning young people from ever being allowed to buy cigarettes, not e-cigarettes, aiming to make the country smoke-free by 2025. Do you think this is a step too far? Well, we'll discuss.
We will indeed. We have all of that coming up and much, much more across the programme. And, of course, you can get in touch with your views. As usual, loads of you have been already. We'll go to them shortly. gbviews@gbnews.uk. But first, Mercy gives her views on an EU-wide ban on hate speech.
The European Commission, that all-powerful, unelected beacon of Western democracy, plans to amend one of the EU's founding texts to criminalise hate speech across the bloc in a bid to boost inclusivity. The new plans would forcefully enshrine a ban on speech considered misogynistic, homophobic, transphobic, amongst other things. Now, the EU will have a war on its hands in its attempt to get the unanimous support of all 27 member states, not least those in the Eastern European bloc who are staunchly culturally conservative and have no time, quite frankly, for the EU's uber-liberal virtue signalling. And whilst I don't condone some of the blatant state-sanctioned xenophobia, sexism and racism that blights many of Eastern Europe's nations, I think it's fair to say that any attempts at banning speech should always be met with a degree of scepticism, a high degree of scepticism. The Commission, for example, suggests in its communiqué that hate can entail targeting gender identity and gender expression, which it calls fundamental characteristics. Which is ironic, because gender expressions, which can by definition be changed on a whim, are everything but fundamental. But my worry is, who gets to decide what counts as hate speech, especially when it comes to the very live and ongoing conversation about gender identity? We know these days, all you have to do is say women have wombs or use the wrong pronoun for someone, and you'll be publicly harangued and labelled a hate preacher. The fact that this kind of speech could be added to the list of EU-wide crimes alongside crimes like human trafficking, terrorism and drug smuggling is liberal lunacy. Europhiles will say I'm over-exaggerating, that the EU is a sensible institution, that the Commission isn't out to cede to the demands of the intolerant wings of the LGBT lobby, that it's not trying to police language unreasonably, just trying to innocently protect minorities. I might be more inclined to believe this if the Commission hadn't, just a few weeks ago, literally tried to ban officials from using words such as man-made and ladies and gentlemen. The Inclusive Language Guide sent to EU Commission officials asked them to never use words such as policeman and mankind, and even tried to ban references to Christmas because they said it discriminated against other religions. They were, of course, embarrassed into U-turning. It might make some people feel nice and fluffy to just smile and nod in agreement when the EU claims to be bolstering the rights of minorities. But those of us who don't want to be dragged carelessly into living in a censorious authoritarian society should receive these new plans with a very raised eyebrow.
Yeah, I get all that. I think one of the things that's happening now as well, it's happening over here, is that people are being told to not say in various commercial settings, like Happy Christmas or anything like that. Happy festive period is what's being wheeled out. I mean, I'm sorry, but it's called Christmas.
Yeah.
In the same way that Eid is called Eid or Hanukkah is Hanukkah.
Absolutely. I think we will be discussing this in more detail later with a guest, but I think the EU are going to not be successful here because, as I said, some EU nations are some of the most, there's rampant sexism and rampant, misogyny and transphobia and all sorts of things in in a way that we would never see in this country, because, you know, we do have more rights for minority groups than many EU nations. So they're not going to get past the likes of Hungary, for example, who are incredibly culturally conservative. And also, I just think I would hate to leave it up to the likes of EU commissioners who, as I said, have been trying to ban their officials from saying man-made. And ladies and gentlemen, I'd hate to leave them to define what hate speech is, because I imagine it would censor the vast majority of sensible people.
Well, absolutely, that's it, and we can't really have that. Well, anyway, it's been a busy 24 hours in the world of British politics. Last night, Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced Plan B COVID restrictions will be enforced in England from tomorrow. The new measures include masks in most public places, COVID passes for large venues, and work-from-home guidance for all those who can. It's like Groundhog Day, isn't it?
Yes, indeed. And as well as that, a tearful Allegra Stratton has resigned from her government advisor position over her jokes about an alleged Downing Street Christmas party that took place during Tier 3 restrictions last year. Well, to bring us right up to date is our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, who was in Downing Street this morning for us. Darren, let's begin just with the basics about what has changed in terms of COVID rules.
Well, first of all, Mercy, before we do that, can I bring you some breaking news from Downing Street that's literally been announced in the last couple of minutes? Welcome news, it must be said, for the Prime Minister, and I'm sure for everyone, and that is that his wife, Carrie, has given birth this morning to what we think is the Prime Minister's seventh child, but their second child together. She gave birth at around 7:40 a.m. at University College London Hospital in Euston. We believe that she arrived there overnight, gave birth in the early hours of this morning. Of course, this will be a younger sibling to Wilf, who was born in the same maternity ward back in April 2020. So the Prime Minister this morning becoming a dad for the seventh time, the second time he's had a child with Carrie Symonds. We'll give you further updates when we get them, but some good news from the Prime Minister in what you say has been a pretty difficult 24 hours, 48 hours, maybe even a week, a couple of months, some might say, for Boris Johnson. Just in terms of the restrictions in setting them out, you're right in saying that England is now moving to to Plan B, I should say, essentially from tomorrow, with face masks, where you have to wear them, being extended to places like cinemas and theatres, to most indoor settings, but doesn't include restaurants and bars. In addition to that, we're going to see the introduction of working from home, the strong guidance on that from Monday. And then, and rather controversially for lots of Conservative MPs, the introduction of COVID passports from next week for indoor venues where you've got more than 500 people, and outdoor venues where you've got more than 4,000 people, and for all venues that have more than 10,000 people. As I say, a lot of Conservative MPs pretty angry about that. Let's bring in our national reporter, Paul Hawkins, who joins me outside Downing Street. And I say that, Paul, because, you know, Conservative MPs were jeering the Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, in the Commons yesterday when he was making this announcement, some calling for him to resign extraordinarily.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, William Ragg, Conservative MP in the Commons, shouting at the Health Secretary to resign, and earlier in the day inferring that the Prime Minister had brought these Plan B measures forward as a diversionary tactic from the scandal that has engulfed Number 10 regarding allegations about these parties. So, yeah, he wasn't happy. The former Tory Chief Whip, Mark Harper, asking why should people at home be following the rules if Number 10 can't follow them either. Douglas Ross, the leader of the Scottish Conservatives, saying that if the PM has misled Parliament, then he should resign. So not even really privately the Conservative MPs here talking about their upset with the Prime Minister. It's very much out in the open. And in fact, just hearing that Labour have been granted an urgent question on the Downing Street party probe by the Commons Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle. So Fleur Anderson, the Shadow Cabinet Office Minister, will ask that question in around about the next 20 minutes. So Labour very much trying to hold on to this. The PM hoping that with those resignations, and that also with the announcement of this independent inquiry, that this will go away at least for the time being. But Labour very much trying to hold on to it. in order to get the legislation through the Commons next week so they can enact these Plan B measures. So it's a really complicated, weird political situation at the moment.
And just to add to that, you say those questions have not gone away. Aside from the restrictions about what may have gone on here last year in November, December, and questions beyond even that party on the 18th of December, suggestions that other parties could well have been held at here in Downing Street, and ones that the Prime Minister himself may have attended.
Yeah, indeed, yeah. I mean, some reports that Carrie Johnson herself was hosted one of these parties, which she flatly denies. So two other parties here at Downing Street, plus the one on December the 18th, so three alleged parties here. Then there is also one that is confirmed at the Department of Education as well. They have said that there was a gathering there attended by 24 people, and that the most senior civil servant in the department has said that the then Education Secretary, Gavin Williamson, organised it himself. Now that party will form part of Simon Case's probe. He's the guy in charge of the staff here at Number 10 who's going to hold this independent inquiry. Question marks as well over whether he was at that party. Lots of journalists yesterday saying, is the guy who's going to hold this inquiry, was he at this alleged party? Number 10 haven't denied that he was at that party. So again, more question marks there raised about the independence of that inquiry.
OK, Paul, thank you very much indeed, and we'll keep across, of course, that Labour vote that is taking place. The Labour question that's going to take place later on this morning in the Commons. Also, Patrick Mercy, while I've got you, in addition to obviously that very good news that the Prime Minister's becoming a dad again, there is another bit of breaking news as well. My word, it's busy this morning here in Downing Street. You remember the Prime Minister's Downing Street flat when he got all that really expensive wallpaper plastered on the walls and the questions about who funded it? Well, the Electoral Commission today found that the Conservative Party failed to accurately report a donation and keep a proper accounting record over that redecoration of the Downing Street flat, and have fined the party nearly 18 grand over that. So the Electoral Commission fining the Conservative Party 18 grand for failing to properly account for who potentially donated for the redecoration of the Prime Minister's flat, which is a big story about 6 months ago. So we've got restrictions, we've got a new baby, we've got a lot of Conservative MPs who are pretty angry, and a fine for the Conservative Party. You cannot say that politics is anything but not dull at the moment.
Busy, busy, busy morning. Thank you very much, Darren. Thank you, Darren McCaffrey there. Our political editor at Downing Street. Gosh, well, there's a lot to unpack there.
Yes, well, congratulations to Carrie.
Yes.
Well, Boris gets something right, at least, doesn't he? So 7 kids and counting.
Yeah, so
hey, I did a monologue yesterday about encouraging people to have more kids, so I think it's a great thing, personally.
Well, yes, he is certainly very good at something. But look, here to tell us a bit more about the science around new restrictions and viral mutations, as well as Hugh Pennington, a professor of bacteriology from the University of Aberdeen. Thank you very much. Now, a lot of people are saying this is actually madness that we're having more restrictions because this Omicron variant apparently so far doesn't appear to have killed anyone. It doesn't appear to be any more harmful. It doesn't appear to be drastically resistant to our vaccine. But obviously I think Delta is still around in a big way, and so therefore potentially that's one reason to just have these restrictions. What do you make of all of this? There's the science behind this mutation. Shouldn't we be very worried?
Well, it depends what we should be worried about. I think the biggest concern would be if Omicron starts affecting older people, who are the people really at risk of getting, into ICU and all that kind of being killed by the virus. And it's too early to tell because most of the cases have been in the unvaccinated and people who are very active, who are spreading viruses. We're getting about 50,000 cases of Delta a day. So the situation is there for the virus to spread, and Omicron undoubtedly spreads more easily than Delta. So we're going to see a lot more cases. And the big question is, will they spill over into the vaccinated? Now, we know in South Africa that quite a few of the cases of Omicron have been in people who've got immunity because either they've been infected with a previous variant or they've had their 2 vaccine shots. I don't think there's much evidence at all about the efficacy of boosters, except the lab data suggests that boosters are very good at protecting against Omicron. But it's a bit too early to tell exactly how much by. And we know that Omicron has so many mutations in it, in the bits of the virus that the antibodies attack. And then there are these T cells as well, which protect against serious infection if they're remembering a previous encounter with the coronavirus. So it's unfortunately too early to tell whether we're going to have big pressure on the NHS because there are sick people rising in numbers and needing intensive care and so on. That's not a very satisfactory answer to say, I don't know, but I don't think anybody knows yet. And it'll take another couple of weeks, unfortunately, around about Christmas time before we know whether this Omicron is really nastier than Delta or whether there are just going to be a lot more cases which people can cope with.
That's right. And you have experience in investigating outbreaks of E. coli before it was and advising governments on how to react to outbreaks. Given what we know about Omicron, I appreciate it's premature to ask you to predict what will happen with Omicron in a few weeks. But given what we know to this day, do you think the government reaction that announced yesterday is proportionate?
Well, it's proportionate in the sense I think they had to feel, they have to show that they were doing something because Omicron is going to take off. I think there's a general view of consensus among the scientists. That's what's going to happen. And of course, if the government didn't do something now, and then the cases took off in really, really accelerated, people would say, why didn't they act, yesterday or whatever it was? The problem is that Plan B is not that fantastic in the sense that it's not going to have a very big effect on the spread of Omicron. We've had similar measures in place, generally speaking, in Scotland, and we still have plenty of Delta buzzing about. So if Omicron gets around easier than Delta, that doesn't really bode very well for Plan B having a big effect. It will have an effect. It will save some lives, but probably have really a rather small effect. I think my own personal view is that Plan B should have come in, when it was first announced in September. And we'd have basically got a better grip on Delta, which is actually killing 150 people a week anyway. No, more than that, 150 people a day. So, we're in a really quite a difficult position. And the Prime Minister's in an even more difficult position because here's the virus taking off at the wrong time of year, and he's having to introduce something which many of his own party don't like. And
well, he knows the thing.
They're not going to have a very effect.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Hugh Pennington, Professor of Bacteriology as well as Virology at the University of Aberdeen. So thank you very much. It's interesting, isn't it, that we're saying, well, look, we don't know. The evidence that we have so far does appear to show that the Omicron strain is milder and not particularly resistant to vaccines and hasn't, as far as we know, killed anyone yet. But he says it'll be a couple of weeks before we know for sure.
Yes, indeed. Well, we'll be talking about that a bit more later on and a lot more as well. And keep your views coming in to us, GBViews at gbnews.uk. We promise we will get to those very shortly. Yes. But after the break, joining us will be royal correspondent Angela Levin, who'll be updating us on the latest developments in the disgraced socialite Ghislaine Maxwell's trial. But first, the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. There's some wet weather around for all of us this evening, but for most of the day, much of central and eastern Britain dry and bright this afternoon. But in the west, we'll start to see the cloud thickening with some outbreaks of rain trickling in. This set of weather fronts responsible for that. The remnants of Storm Barra clearing away out into the North Sea. We're left with some cloud across the far northeast from that and the odd shower across northern Scotland around lunchtime. But it's this next weather front that will bring patchy rain to Northern Ireland, turning damp this afternoon for Wales and southwest England, whereas much of the Midlands, eastern England and the bulk of eastern Scotland dry and bright with some sunshine. Temperatures around about average for the time of year, turning a little milder in the southwest, but it will also be turning breezier and wetter. In fact, we'll all see some rain, I think, through this evening. That rain spreading over the Midlands into eastern England. Could get quite heavy for a time through the late part of the evening across East Anglia and the southeast before that scoots away during the early hours. And then skies start to clear once more and we're left with a few showers across the west. It will turn quite cold, and as it does so, we could just see things turning a little icy across parts of Scotland. So that's just something to be aware of first thing in the morning. Basically, it's a bright sunny start across much of eastern England and the south, and then we'll see showers developing through the day. Quite a few showers for northwest England, North Wales, Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland. Here the showers will come and go throughout. A few for South Wales, southwest England. The odd one getting further east, but much of eastern England, southern England, dry and fine. Temperatures again around average, but feeling a little colder because there will be a fairly brisk and chilly wind blowing tomorrow. That'll keep blowing in showers across these western areas well into Friday evening, whereas again further east largely dry and clear, and that hint of blue suggesting quite an early frost, leading to a chilly start to the weekend, but it will slowly turn milder. Bit of a mishmash this weekend. Won't rain all weekend, but there will certainly be some around, and it'll be breezy.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
I'm Olivia Guthrie. Here are the latest headlines. Boris Johnson is facing a revolt from Tory backbenchers who are questioning the government's credibility in enforcing England's Plan B COVID rules. The backlash from the Prime Minister... We're going to leave this now to go to the Commons live.
Just ask the question. Will the Minister provide more information about the COVID parties investigation? Thank you.
We now have the Minister to reply.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as the Prime Minister said to the House yesterday, he understands and shares the anger up and down the country, as do I, at seeing Number 10 staff seeming to make light of lockdown measures. I join the Prime Minister in apologising unreservedly, Mr. Speaker, for the offence that it has caused to people who have been through what everyone in this House knows is immeasurable pain and hardship as a result of this appalling pandemic. The Prime Minister has been repeatedly assured, since these allegations emerged, that there was no party and that no COVID rules were broken. However, the government also recognises the public anxiety about this and the public indignation. And I share that. And it appears as though the people, in the sense that where it appears as though the people who have been setting the rules may not have been following the rules. Now, as the Prime Minister confirmed to the House yesterday, he has asked the Cabinet Secretary to investigate the facts. And I would like to update the House now, if I may, on the details of this investigation. Now, Mr. Speaker, the terms of reference for the investigation are being published, and I will lay a copy in the library of the House later today. Now, I can confirm to the House that the Cabinet Secretary's investigation will establish the facts surrounding the following. Allegations made of a gathering at number 10 Downing Street on the 27th of November 2020, a gathering at the Department for Education on the 10th of December 2020, and allegations made of a gathering at number 10 Downing Street on the 18th of December 2020. Now, the primary purpose of the Cabinet Secretary's investigation will be to establish swiftly a general understanding of the nature of the gatherings, including attendance, the setting and the purpose, and with reference to adherence to the guidance in place at the time. Now, if required, the investigation will establish whether individual disciplinary action is warranted. Now, Mr. Speaker, the work will be undertaken by officials in the Cabinet Office at the direction of the Cabinet Secretary, with support from the Government Legal Department. Now, those officials will have access to all relevant records and be able to speak to members of staff. Now, as with all internal investigations, if during the course of the work any evidence emerges of behaviour that is potentially a criminal offence, the matter will be referred to the police and the Cabinet Office's work may be paused. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, I must emphasise the matters relating to adherence to the law are properly for the police to investigate, and the Cabinet Office will liaise with the police as appropriate. All ministers, special advisers and civil servants will be expected to cooperate with this investigation. And finally, Mr. Speaker, I can confirm, as I've said, that the findings of the investigation will be provided to the House and made public. Following the long-standing practice of successive administrations, any specific HR action against individuals will remain confidential.
Just say to the Minister, it's meant to be 3 minutes, not over 4 minutes. So just a minute. So what I would say is, I'm going to give some flexibility to the other two benches. Fleur Anderson.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank you for granting this urgent question today, and I thank the Paymaster General's statement and more information about this investigation. Trust is vitally important during a pandemic. Trust in the decisions being made, and most importantly, trust in the people making those decisions and the judgment about them. My constituent Sophie wrote to me yesterday. She said, "My mother died of COVID on Christmas Day last year. She was alone and frightened in an isolation room in a hospital on the 18th of December while the alleged party was happening. She was admitted to hospital for a non-COVID related issue and contracted the disease whilst there. Both of us had followed the rules, and it breaks my heart that I was only able to see her a handful of times last year and I couldn't be with her in her final moments. She is angry. People across the country are angry. I welcome the Prime Minister's announcement that he's asked the Cabinet Secretary to conduct this investigation. I've asked for this urgent question as there are further urgent questions to be asked about the investigation. And I don't think we need to call them into alleged parties. They are the parties. Held in the government department or by government ministers elsewhere. Are there more parties that we need to hear about? Is this investigation just to say, we're doing something, we'll push it into the long grass, or is it a serious investigation? The Prime Minister has said yesterday, "I've been repeatedly assured that there was no party and no COVID rules were broken, but I've asked the Cabinet Secretary to establish these facts." Who gave these repeated assurances? If there was no party, why did Allegra Stratton feel the need to resign? Is she taking the fall instead of government ministers? If this investigation finds out that the Prime Minister has misled the House, Mr. Speaker, will he resign? I look forward to the terms of reference for the investigation being published later today. Will it include all the parties, not just those three, but any others that were held? Who went to these parties? Can the Minister confirm that the Cabinet Secretary and the remainder of the legal team, just been referenced, didn't go to any of these parties and so are able to conduct the investigation without personal interest? If they happened, who colluded for over a year in the cover-up of these parties? When is the deadline for this investigation? How will the outcomes be made public? Is there any limit on the sanctions that will be given to the people who are found out to have been in the wrong? I welcome the assurance from the Paymaster General that he will refer the Cabinet Secretary. This will be referred to the police if there is a case to answer. And we, from this side, will be following this very closely. Finally, will the government just be straight with the British people? Thank you.
Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I say, first of all, that my heart goes out to her correspondent or constituent and anyone else who lost loved ones, the many thousands who have lost loved ones as a result of this pandemic. The investigation that she refers to, as I said in my opening remarks, is going to be conducted by the Cabinet Secretary. I know that she and those behind her, as well as everyone in this House, has confidence in the independence and integrity of our civil service. The Cabinet Secretary heads the civil service and he is conducting this investigation. As to how long it will last, that will be a matter for him, and the matter will, if it discloses criminality, be reported to the Metropolitan Police for further investigation. But I also, in a previous ministerial role as a law officer, Solicitor General and Attorney General, superintended the Government Legal Department, and that is another organisation which, of course, has integrity and the confidence of all. And it will also be supporting the investigation. All those who are questioned by the investigation, civil servants, special advisers, ministers, are expected and will be expected to cooperate with it. I hope that answers her questions.
Sir Desmond Swain.
Would it be helpful if there were a greater understanding of the fact that number 10 is not a house, it is a front door behind which there is a suite of modern offices and meeting rooms across 3 floors, and it is perfectly possible to be in the rafters above number 11, completely isolated from what else is happening in the building?
Well, it is certainly true as a matter of geography that number 10 Downing Street is a very large property with a multitude of offices and with many, many people working inside it. In that sense, of course, geographically, he's absolutely correct.
Martin Dockett-Hughes, the SNP spokesperson.
On the 16th of December, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister asked everyone on national television to exercise the greatest possible personal responsibility. London then also went to Tier 3 restrictions. That is, no person may participate in a gathering. You must not have a work, Christmas, lunch or party, whether it's an office or in somebody's flat upstairs. On the 18th of December, Dr. Catherine Henderson of the Royal College of Emergency Medicine stated in BBC, we're at a really dangerous point where we could tip into finding it incredibly difficult to manage. The same day, 514 people died of COVID-19. I'm sure the NHS, those in care homes, were already over the tipping point. On the 18th of December, the Prime Minister stated, if you're forming a Christmas bubble, it is vital that from today you minimise contact with people from outside your household. The evening the statement was given by the Prime Minister in Downing Street, a Christmas party was held in number 10, where officials knocked back glasses of wine during a Christmas quiz and a secret Santa. So I wonder if the Paymaster General would agree with me that if something looks like a duck, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, And it's at a Christmas party, it's usually a duck.
Minister.
Well, no doubt, Mr. Speaker, if the honourable gentleman has any evidence, he may wish to supply it to the Cabinet Secretary or the police. But the point is, he's rehearsed to the House what regulations were in place at the time, and the reality is that that is accepted. What we need to do is investigate the matter of these gatherings. I've said what the primary purpose is going to be, which is to swiftly establish a general understanding of the nature of any gatherings that took place, including attendance, including the setting, and including the purpose. That's what the investigation's all about.
Theresa Villy.
There is understandable, real public anger about what seems to have happened at Downing Street, and that is contributing.
Right, well, as you can see there, and as you have been watching, that's the inside of the House of Commons, and yes, statements being given there about this investigation that's going to take place into, as far as we can see there, 3 gatherings.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's the very latest.
Yeah,
really.
so they said that was Michael Ellis, the Paymaster General there, and he said that the investigation will look at who was involved, what were the purposes of the parties, alleged parties was, and they'll try to get to the bottom of it. But of course, Boris Johnson did say yesterday that there will be disciplinary action involved if that's appropriate, if rules were broken, because he's been adamant so far that no rules were actually broken, which is hard to believe if all the reports we're hearing are true. But of course, we'll update you about all of that as when we know.
Rather ominously, he dropped in that this. Of course, whilst this will all be published, and it will be published in the House of Commons library, and it will be made public generally, any HR matters regarding any individuals will be kept private, which implies heads are going to roll. But anyway, right, well, moving away from that just now. The jury trial of Ghislaine Maxwell has been shown a picture of the British socialite sitting with the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein at the Queen's residence in Balmoral.
Yes, the pair can be seen on a bench outside a log cabin in the grounds of the Scottish estate. You can see the picture there. Both the Queen and Prince Philip were regularly photographed in the exact same spot. Prosecutors used the image as part of their efforts to establish a close relationship between Maxwell and Epstein.
Indeed. Well, Angela Levin is a biographer and royal correspondent and friend of the channel, and she joins us now. Angela, thank you very much. Does this suggest to you that there was a very close relationship between Epstein, Maxwell and Prince Andrew as well?
Well, of course, because you would only invite people up to Scotland to see his much-loved mother if you really like them. I mean, the Queen needs people who are entertaining and decent, not people who run a sort of child trafficking operation at the same time. He did. And what's very interesting is that when he was on the BBC Newsweek programme, he said he thought he only saw him once a year, maximum twice. Well, we count this as one. And then he invited him to a huge party at Windsor Castle in 2000 when 5 royals had different birthdays, different ages. He was there. And he also came for pheasant shooting, quite close to that. And that's 3 in one go, isn't it? So that was a nonsense. I expect he couldn't remember, but that only goes so far.
And of course, we do have to say Prince Andrew has denied all allegations against him about his involvement with all of this. Ghislaine is obviously...
He hasn't denied that he saw him.
The allegations. He denies the allegations for Virginia Giuffre, the allegations against sexual abuse by Virginia Giuffre. So Maxwell has been, of course, arrested on charges, is facing trial on charges relating to trafficking and sexual abuse of young girls. Based on what we've heard in the trial so far, do you think there has been damning evidence that will be enough to convince the jury?
Well, I don't know, because I'm not a judge, and as we've discovered with other things, that we can't always agree with what a judge decides. But what's interesting are the pictures that say a lot in words. I mean, Maxwell has only said that she was only a friend or a companion. But actually, I've never seen a companion want to rub somebody's foot into their breast on a plane. I mean, I think you have a line that's drawn before you do something like that, because they're no longer a companion. much more. And all those photographs were quite sickly, actually. Again, there were lots of pictures of young girls in rather overt positions all around his home in New York, which Prince Andrew said he hadn't seen. I mean, I'm not attacking Prince Andrew here. I'm just saying these pictures make statements that actually are more than words.
Yes, absolutely. Well, look, Angela, thank you very, very much. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. No doubt we'll be talking about this issue again very, very soon as this trial rumbles on. Angela Levin there, of course, royal biographer, author and commentator. But just moving away from that now, a 14-year-old Palestinian girl stabbed an Israeli woman yesterday in a disputed East Jerusalem neighbourhood. Israeli police have reported this. Now, Mariah Chopra was stabbed in the back, was stabbed in the back as she was walking her children to school in what was the 6th Palestinian attack in Jerusalem in just 3 weeks.
Yes, Cohen and her family are among the few Jewish residents of Sheikh Jarrah, where a pro-settler Israeli organisation has been attempting for years to evict Palestinian residents. Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett has said in a tweet, Israel will not allow terrorism to raise its head.
Well, spokesperson for the Israeli embassy, Awad Zemit, is with us now. Thank you very much for taking the time to come into the studio for us today. It does look like a terrifying upturn in violence domestically against Israeli citizens.
First of all, thank you for having me. We saw in the last 3 weeks, I think, as you mentioned, 6 attacks. We saw just yesterday a 14-year-old trying to stab a woman walking with her kids. We saw a person, I think it was a few days ago, looking for a visibly Jewish person and start stabbing him. We saw the video. And the reason behind this is incitements. We see on social media, we see groups like Hamas, this jihadi group who wants to replace Israel with an Islamic State, advocating for violence, advocating for glorifying the martyrdom. And this is a problem we all need to tackle, because it's not only in Israel, it's not only in the Middle East. Now with social media, it's everywhere.
But you have been condemned, well, the Israeli government has been condemned by both US President Joe Biden and the UN for your policy against the Palestinian. And in fact, the UN says Israeli settlements are the engine of the occupation, and that they're basically trampling upon the fundamental precepts of humanitarian and human rights. So there is lots of condemnation about how the Israeli government is treating the Palestinians as well.
A 14-year-old child, or we can say child, that takes a knife and stabs a woman walking with her kids. It's not, and he doesn't want to make peace. It's not an issue of of having dialogue, of having a peaceful resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's purely incitement, purely what they see in social media. And actually, you see in Jerusalem people, hitting Jewish people and posting this on TikTok, and then sharing this with their friends. And we saw here also in London, we saw in recently as May, during the conflict in Gaza, we saw people in front of the Israeli embassy burning Israeli flags. We saw just next to my house a convoy of people chanting death to Jews. And we saw in Oxford Street last week, people throwing shoes and spitting on kids that are visibly Jewish. This is not, here is London. This is not, it's not Israel. And we saw also people, saw the stabbing in London Bridge, it was 2 years ago. People are, it's our way of life, and that is threatening to this jihadi group. It's not the issue of a peaceful resolution. They don't want Israel in any borders, I think.
And you touched on something now that I wanted to bring up anyway, so we might as well go down that route now, which is, in my consideration anyway, what appears to be a worrying upturn in anti-Semitism on the streets of Britain, especially around areas of North London, for example, or indeed Oxford Street, as you said. What do you think is fueling that?
As I said, we have now, now with social media, we have ideology, radical ideology, from the Middle East. It doesn't stay there. It migrates, and you saw people, consuming, they don't consume the normal, specifically young people, they don't consume normal British television. They consume social media.
Sorry to interrupt, just quickly, do you think that other forms of racism are treated more seriously than anti-Semitism in this country specifically as well?
I don't want to I'm a diplomat. I don't want to pass any judgment on the British government. What I can say is that we work together with the British government, specifically on anti-Semitism and also on tackling terrorism. We just saw, I think it was a few weeks ago, we saw the British government prescribing Hamas in its entirety as a terrorist organization. And this is a major step in fighting terrorism, also in fighting anti-Semitism. I think the British government is really pushing forward on this, because anti-Semitism, it's not only a problem of Israel, it's not only a problem of the Jewish people, it's a problem for every society. Every society, and what starts with the Jews don't end with the Jews. So we need to tackle it.
And the violence that we are seeing, as you allude to there, it's a problem for everybody in Israel. It's not just specific to those particular groups, those ethnic groups, etc. What is the Israeli government doing now to make sure that this violence doesn't continue, and actually that all people in the country can be kept safe and the violence can be curbed?
So first of all, the Israeli police is trying its best in order to monitor, in order to safeguard people, because it's not only violence against, as I said, violence as violence. It's not good, and they need to police the situation. Also, in terms of incitement, which I can say the Israeli in the educational system and in the media tries to advocate for more peaceful dialogue, more integration with our population within Israel. There is a lot of good initiatives of bringing people together. I think this is what we need to do against people who try to advocate for hate and violence.
In your opinion, or indeed the Israeli government's opinion, what would the Palestinian people have to do, the Palestinian government have to do, for you to now consider that was grounds for completely good relations? So basically, to stop an end of the tit for tat that's been going on relentlessly now for a very long time. What movement would you have to see from the Palestinians?
I think, first of all, a change of discourse. Israeli policy has always been, we want peace. We want to go to the negotiating table and try to create a better future for us. The recent agreements we had with the Arab states, with the UAE, with Bahrain, with Morocco, we see a trend in the region, a trend in the Middle East of bringing people together. And you see, on the other hand, by the way, in the Middle East, you see radical groups led by Iran with their jihadi ideology, who wants to bring the region backwards. Instead of bringing people together, instead of dialogue, they advocate for violence, not only against Israel, also against, American forces, we see British forces. So it's very much a way of speaking, of dialogue. This is what we want.
Do you not think it's disingenuous, though, to suggest the violence is all coming from one side entirely, and to suggest that the Israeli state, its only sort of purpose and its only approach has been one of dialogue?
I think that we have a conflict with the Palestinians, and it's not new. It's a conflict for more than 100 years. In every time we try to sit and negotiate, we had people coming and trying to break it with violence. Specifically, I have to say, in the 90s, when the peace process was in its peak, we saw Hamas groups blowing up buses, etc. I think the majority of the people in Israel don't want violence. I think the Israeli government, we are a democratic country. It's not that the state is trying to create violence or to do something. We try to police the situation. And Jerusalem is a very hard area to police, I have to say, when you have all these groups, using religion, and it's a very tight environment.
I can imagine. Well, look, thank you so much for coming in, and obviously, hopefully, the situation in Israel does just calm down, to say the least, and hopefully we can meet up again soon. It'd be great to speak to you again. Spokesperson for the Israeli Embassy, Ohad Zemit, there, who was in the studio just reacting to an uptick in violence in Israel, but also discussing, of course, the wider situations, and as we spoke about last week, anti-Semitism on the streets of Britain as well.
Yes, indeed. Well, keep all your thoughts coming into us on email, gbviews@gbnews.uk. We've had such a packed show, I don't think we've even had much of a chance to go to the inbox, but we will, I promise you, be going to your views very shortly after this break.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. There's some wet weather around for all of us this evening, but for most of the day, much of central and eastern Britain dry and bright this afternoon. But in the west, we'll start to see the cloud thickening with some outbreaks of rain trickling in. This set of weather fronts responsible for that. The remnants of Storm Barra clearing away out into the North Sea. We're left with some cloud across the far northeast from that and the odd shower across northern Scotland around lunchtime. But it's this next weather front that will bring patchy rain to Northern Ireland, turning damp this afternoon for Wales and southwest England, whereas much of the Midlands, eastern England and the bulk of eastern Scotland dry and bright with some sunshine. Temperatures around about average for the time of year, turning a little milder in the southwest, but it will also be turning breezier and wetter. In fact, we'll all see some rain, I think, through this evening. That rain spreading over the Midlands into eastern England. Could get quite heavy for a time through the late part of the evening across East Anglia and the southeast before that scoots away during the early hours. And then skies start to clear once more and we're left with a few showers across the west. Will turn quite cold, and as it does so, we could just see things turning a little icy across parts of Scotland. So that's just something to be aware of first thing in the morning. Basically, it's a bright sunny start across much of eastern England and the south, and then we'll see showers developing through the day. Quite a few showers for northwest England, North Wales, Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland. Here the showers will come and go throughout. A few for South Wales, southwest England. The odd one getting further east, but much of eastern England, southern England, dry and fine. Temperatures again around average, but feeling a little colder because there will be a fairly brisk and chilly wind blowing tomorrow. That'll keep blowing in showers across these western areas well into Friday evening, whereas again further east largely dry and clear, and that hint of blue suggesting quite an early frost, leading to a chilly start to the weekend, but it will slowly turn milder. Bit of a mishmash this weekend. Won't rain all weekend, but there will certainly be some around, and it'll be breezy.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
I'm Olivia Guthrie. This is your news at 11 o'clock. The Cabinet Secretary will now investigate 3 alleged parties in Downing Street and Whitehall during lockdown last year. During urgent questions in the House of Commons, Cabinet Minister Michael Ellis says they're looking into several claims. It comes after a leaked video showing Number 10 staff laughing about restrictions following an alleged Downing Street party, which forced the resignation of government aide Allegra Stratton.
Now, I can confirm to the House that the Cabinet Secretary's investigation will establish the facts surrounding the following. Allegations made of a gathering at Number 10 Downing Street on the 27th of November 2020, a gathering at the Department for Education on the 10th of December 2020, and allegations made of a gathering at Number 10 Downing Street on the 18th of December 2020.
Meanwhile, Boris Johnson's facing revolt from Tory backbenchers who are questioning the government's credibility in enforcing England's Plan B COVID rules. The backlash from the Prime Minister's party comes amid allegations of a Downing Street Christmas party last year. New rules include extending mandatory masks to indoor public venues, such as cinemas and theatres, and guidance to work from home where possible will return on Monday. Mr Johnson has denied bringing forward announcements to divert attention from the row.
Just as the 1922 committee, way back in the 1990s, saw Margaret Thatcher, we never thought that the Iron Lady would ever be forced to resign from the premiership, but she was. So basically, we're in a situation here, even though Boris has a massive Commons majority, at some point or other, the backbenchers' rebellion could be at such a stage that the Tory party decides there's only one way forward, and that's replace the leader.
The Conservative Party has been fined almost £18,000 over the redecoration of Boris Johnson's Downing Street flat. The Electoral Commission says it failed to accurately report a donation and keep a proper accounting record. A party spokesman said they were considering an appeal. New government plans could see prosecutors meet the victims of crime before making charging decisions. The Ministry of Justice has launched a consultation into reforms, which Justice Secretary Dominic Raab says will give victims a louder voice. The proposals could also see whole neighbourhoods being asked how antisocial behaviour has affected their area. Meanwhile, the minimum victim surcharge could also be raised to £100. Meanwhile, Dominic Raab is self-isolating after coming into contact with Australia's Deputy Prime Minister, who has since tested positive for coronavirus. Barnaby Joyce confirmed he tested positive while travelling in Washington, DC. A spokeswoman for Mr Raab said he was getting tested. Scottish Conservative leader Douglas Ross is also self-isolating after a member of staff tested positive. Cancer patients should be able to check whether they're eligible for clinical trials, experts have said. The Institute of Cancer Research has suggested patients and doctors should be able to self-refer following a 60% drop in recruitment during COVID. Nearly 1 in 4 people celebrating Christmas will struggle to afford it this year. That's according to research from a national debt charity. Step Change found that 1 in 12 will borrow to pay for festive spending, with a quarter taking a year or more to pay the money back. Those who are borrowing say rising household costs, reduced income and the recent loss of the temporary uplift to universal credit are among the reasons. The aircraft carrier HMS Queen Elizabeth is returning home today following the loss of £100 million fighter jet at sea. The Royal Navy flagship had originally been expected to return to Portsmouth tomorrow, but that was brought forward due to concerns about the weather. In November, an F-35B Lightning jet crashed into the Mediterranean after tumbling off the deck. The jet pilot escaped unharmed. A member of the carrier's crew has been arrested on suspicion of leaking video footage of the incident. And Boris Johnson and his wife Carrie have announced the birth of a baby girl at a London hospital earlier today. It's the couple's second child after the birth of their son Wilfred in April 2020. A spokesman for the couple said both mother and daughter are doing very well. I'll be back with the latest headlines in half an hour. Now let's return to The Point.
Good morning, you're watching To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Moroki, and Patrick Christie's, and we've got another hour full of all of today's big stories and lots of discussion on the issues you care about.
Yes, indeed. Right, so yesterday, former Number 10 Press Secretary Allegra Stratton resigned in floods of tears after being filmed joking about a Number 10 party last Christmas, which took place when indoor gatherings were banned in London. And hours later, the Prime Minister revealed more COVID restrictions for England, so we'll bring you up to speed on all of that.
Yes, and a police operation is underway in Ipswich to target organised crime on the roads. Such operations will receive millions of pounds under Prime Minister Boris Johnson's new plans to clamp down on county lines gangs. We'll be speaking to our East of England reporter, Amelia Harper, for more.
Yes, we will indeed. Our new photographs show a planet orbiting around a two-star system, something thought to be impossible until now. Astronomers believe planets could not exist around stars this massive and this hot. But we'll bring you more on that.
Really exciting stuff. You like a bit of space, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And hot stars.
OK, we have all of that coming up and much more across the programme. And you can get in touch with your views, as usual, GBViews at gbnews.uk. But first, Patrick gives his views on showing more respect to our elderly.
We don't respect the elderly in this country. We don't care about them. All too often, we don't care for them. Certainly, in Britain, it's no fun getting old. Research by Age UK found that nearly 1 million people aged over 65 do not have anyone to celebrate Christmas with this year. It's supposed to be a time for celebration, for family, for unity, for generosity and for good cheer. But this year, around 675,000 pensioners say they're feeling fed up about being alone, with as many as 970,540 saying they would not have anyone to share Christmas with. The research found some 625,000 said they were feeling depressed, around 400,000 felt forgotten, and around 250,000 spoke of being anxious. It's deadly stuff, this, isn't it? One elderly person, get this, a 94-year-old lady called Connie, lives alone, and she said that she felt scared that her voice was not working properly because she spoke to so few people during lockdown. We all remember, don't we, national treasure Captain Sir Tom Moore, who managed to raise nearly £40 million for the NHS by walking up and down his garden. One thing that really stands out to me about all of this is that he says that he felt invisible following the death of his wife in 2006. Apparently, he tried to get a job at the age of 86 and people just laughed at him. So I wanted to bring attention to something that I think is long overdue. A dedicated fundraising and awareness day for our senior citizens. The Captain Tom Foundation is working alongside Dame Esther Ranson on its latest venture, Captain Tom Day, to help make sure the older generation feels seen, heard and, most importantly, valued by our society. The details are still being finalised, but the idea is almost like a kind of Children in Need Day for old people. I think this is absolutely fantastic. There are 12.4 million people aged 65 and over in the UK. There are 3.2 million aged over 80 and 1.6 million aged over 85. That's a huge number of people. That, if we ignore them, if we don't respect them, and if we look through them rather than directly at them, is actually bad for Britain. I'll never be able to understand why there is such little respect for the elderly. By definition, if it wasn't for them, then we wouldn't be here. Many elderly people, like Captain Sir Tom Moore, fought during the war. They literally saved Britain, and then they helped rebuild it. Many elderly people had very humble beginnings and were forced to mend and make do a lot. They crippled themselves so that future generations could leapfrog up in society. The accumulated wisdom that comes with the elderly is a tremendous resource for us. Their experiences and their knowledge have real value. The advice they can offer, they've seen it all come and go, and far from ignoring them, we should be actively picking their brains and trying to learn from them. Many elderly people voted for Brexit, and then many Remainers sought to make the kind of half joke that they'll be dead soon, so by the time we have another referendum, it won't really matter. How massively disrespectful is that? Old people shouldn't vote because they won't be around to see the consequences of their decisions. I think it should be the other way around. We should be trusting them to make the decisions. I worry that with the breakdown of the nuclear family in Britain, it can leave a lot of old people isolated. But I wonder, too, if it is removing the traditional sense of family unity and the sense of duty that younger generations have towards the old. The online world has left many people marginalised and frozen out in the senior citizen community. Many struggle with online banking or ringing up their gas and electricity firm just to be told by some robot voice that they have to go and do it on their laptop. Virtual GP appointments, old people often struggle with those to the point they may actually be too afraid or maybe even embarrassed to actually do them. I welcome this move by the wonderful Captain Sir Tom Moore Foundation and, of course, Esther Ranson, who set up the Silver Line charity to have a dedicated day for our elderly. But it shouldn't just be one day. It should be every day. It's time that we did more to look after a generation of people who have looked after us. Yeah, I'm worried that how marginalised a lot of old people are. It's not just the physical elements of it, like maybe they are alone or, you know, this, that and the other. But, you know, even just day-to-day society, it's getting, with the more technology and things like that, some old people are great with laptops and computers, but some aren't, you know?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a cultural thing that I don't think will change in the immediate term, because I'm from Kenya personally, and I know in a lot of African cultures, in a lot of global South cultures generally, that there's intergenerational households are part of the norm. You're almost born with a sense of duty towards your elderly and a sense of respect. And that's not something that's as common in Western societies, really. And that's why the idea of, for example, my family ever putting my grandma into a home, that would just simply, that's not even an option. That would never happen in my family. So there is definitely a cultural element with it. But I think, you know, this idea is absolutely fantastic, completely. We have loads about children, don't we? We have loads about helping, you know, people from abroad, children from abroad, helping solve poverty abroad. And I think it is very much time that we, you know, dedicate ourselves to helping older people in this country. And let's not forget as well, we have an ageing population. I spoke yesterday about low fertility rates in this country, which means that the pensioner population will just grow and grow and grow. And so, you know, in a couple of decades' time, a huge proportion of us, much bigger proportion than now, will be elderly, and we will need somebody to be looking after us. And I hope initiatives like this go a long way in sort of changing that culture.
I agree completely. Look, I think this is, you know, it really saddens me as well, because a lot of older people do come from that generation where it's a difficult thing to articulate this. Maybe there was more day-to-day politeness, maybe there was more respect, maybe there was a little bit more innocence as well, I think. And I do think that, you know, a lot of old people are too proud to ask for help. And especially over times of the winter months when, you know, it's more expensive than it's ever been to heat your home, hasn't it? Let's be honest. A lot of old people are having to choose between whether or not they put food on the table or whether or not they heat their house, whether or not... Well, more too often, there'll be people here now, there'll possibly be people watching this, actually, who will go without heating today so that they can make sure they get their grandkids a Christmas present or something like that. And I think that actually, you know what, as a society, it should be a marker about how well we are doing as a country by how well we treat our old people. Because, as Mercy said, all right, I think the chances of me living past 80 are pretty slim, to say the least, but most people will. You'll probably live forever. You look like you're gonna hit the 100 mark, I would have thought.
Thank you, I hope so.
That's all right. Think about that. You could have at least 30 years without me in the world.
Yeah, my plan is to have as many great-great-great-grandchildren as possible.
But that's it. Well, look, we are going to go to a few of your views.
Yes, finally.
Finally, first time of the day, actually. Thank you very much, everyone who's been diligently still emailing in. GBviews at gbnews.uk. At last, someone's taking speaking up for the elderly. That's good stuff. Now, we've had a good one here. Kevin. As an 85-year-old person, I can confirm getting old is not for sissies. Thank you very much, Kevin. I like that. We need a bit more of that spirit, I think. Saying the government will not value the elderly. Worst pension in Europe, approximately 9,000 per year, and that's from Sue. And that's a good point, Sue.
Do you know what? I sometimes think that's so much of the disdain towards the older generations that people of our generation might have is because of ideological reasons, actually, because they just think, oh, well, they're conservative voters, you know, and I do wonder what would happen if, you know, all the oldies were actually massively left-wing and massively eco-warriors like the younger generation. Maybe they might be more inclined to value them more. But I do think that people of my generations see old people as, oh, well, they've had it easy in life. They've got their house, they've got their assets, they're well off. And it's actually a lot of the time a complete misconception about how a lot of people, older people in this country, are living their lives.
Yeah, look, Eve, this is you know, devastating. At my age, I now have to think, do I eat or do I heat? And that's the reality, isn't it? Thank you, Eve. Obviously, wish you all the best. And it's it's just such a sad state of affairs that we are here, aren't we? Really, but yes, I'm 64 and I can see and experience no respect or love for the elderly. When I worked in Italy, the government there used to pay for holidays for the elderly. All the best, keep up the reporting. That's from Steve. There's lots of this going about.
Yes, keep your views coming in. Indeed, gbviews@gbnews.uk. But after the break, journalist and author Ella Whelan joins us to discuss the European Commission and their plans to introduce hate crime legislation within the EU, something I discussed in my monologue at 10 o'clock. So we'll be discussing that a bit more with Ella. But first, the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. There's some wet weather around for all of us this evening, but for most of the day, much of central and eastern Britain dry and bright this afternoon. But in the west, we'll start to see the cloud thickening with some outbreaks of rain trickling in. This set of weather fronts responsible for that. The remnants of Storm Barra clearing away out into the North Sea. We're left with some cloud across the far northeast from that and the odd shower across northern Scotland around lunchtime. But it's this next weather front that will bring patchy rain to Northern Ireland, turning damp this afternoon for Wales and southwest England, whereas much of the Midlands, eastern England and the bulk of eastern Scotland dry and bright with some sunshine. Temperatures around about average for the time of year, turning a little milder in the southwest, but it will also be turning breezier and wetter. In fact, we'll all see some rain, I think, through this evening. That rain spreading over the Midlands into eastern England. Could get quite heavy for a time through the late part of the evening across East Anglia and the southeast before that scoots away during the early hours. And then skies start to clear once more and we're left with a few showers across the west. It will turn quite cold, and as it does so, we could just see things turning a little icy across parts of Scotland. So that's just something to be aware of first thing in the morning. Basically, it's a bright sunny start across much of eastern England and the south, and then we'll see showers developing through the day. Quite a few showers for northwest England, North Wales, Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland. Here the showers will come and go throughout. A few for South Wales, southwest England. The odd one getting further east, but much of eastern England, southern England, dry and fine. Temperatures, again, around average, but feeling a little colder because there will be a fairly brisk and chilly wind blowing tomorrow. That'll keep blowing in showers across these western areas well into Friday evening, whereas, again, further east, largely dry and clear, and that hint of blue suggesting quite an early frost, leading to a chilly start to the weekend, but it will slowly turn milder. Bit of a mishmash this weekend. Won't rain all weekend, but there will certainly be some around, and it'll be breezy.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Now, the European Union's Commission is set to amend a founding law and forcefully enshrine the rights of minorities to fight violence and hate against its citizens, including women and those in the LGBT community. The draft plan is expected to be presented later this week as the first step in a larger plan to improve the EU's rules to better fight hate crimes.
Yes, indeed. Well, the rules would enable the Commission to put forward laws to punish misogyny and anti-LGBTQ plus abuse online and offline. So, yes, there we go. Obviously, we touched on this a little bit yesterday, but no, I think...
we touched on it yesterday and earlier as well. But the point I made was who defines hate crime.
Yes.
That's my main issue with it.
Yes, well, I think so, and that's it. And I think as well as, I hope that it doesn't lead to a situation of like, well, frankly, the idea that you can be criminalised for something that you say in your front room, within reason, obviously, but also the fact that, you know, it might lead to a lot of self-censorship as well.
Yeah.
You know, and more groupthink. And, you know, what really happened, what's some of the things that have got us into trouble in the past, it's been groupthink and not being able to actually feel free to express your opinion.
Yeah, well, in a moment, we will be speaking to Ella Whelan, who's a journalist with the Political magazine, and we'll be asking her, you know, what is all this about, and will they actually get it through? Because they need the unanimous approval of all 27 member states, some of which include some very staunchly, culturally conservative nations, Eastern European nations predominantly. So we'll bring you that conversation very shortly.
Well, yes, again, isn't it? You know, the lovely, fluffy bastion of liberalism over there on the continent is now trying to control what you kind of can't say. So there we go. Anyway, New Zealand, moving away. Talking of control, actually, this is another one. Can I just point this out? What happened to the world, right? All of these places and all of these countries that I thought were like bolt holes for me if it all went to pot. You know, oh, it's all right, don't worry. I'd always be all right in Australia. Oh, don't worry, no, New Zealand. We can't go wrong in New Zealand. Now, all of a sudden, they're doing all sorts of mad stuff, aren't they? New Zealand is set to enforce some of the world's strictest smoking laws. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, her radical plan, to say the least, will ban those aged 14 or under from ever being allowed to buy cigarettes as part of a public health drive that aims to make the entire country smoke-free by 2025.
Yes, each year the age limit will increase, so the age limit at which you can buy cigarettes, and this will expand the percentage of the population who will never legally be allowed to smoke. Well, let's talk to Simon Clark, who's director of the smokers group Forest, which represents adults who choose to consume tobacco and those who are tolerant of other people's enjoyment of tobacco. It's not necessarily, I would say, a pro-tobacco. Is that you wouldn't describe yourself as necessarily pro-tobacco, you just pro the choice to smoke tobacco. What do you make of this then?
Well, I think it's bizarre because it's prohibition in all but name. And as we know, prohibition very rarely works. The classic example, of course, is the prohibition of alcohol in the United States 100 years ago. They had to give that up after 12 years as a bad job. It simply wasn't working. And look at the war on illegal drugs. I mean, can we honestly say that is working and that is preventing people using illegal drugs like cannabis, cocaine, and God knows what else? So the idea you can essentially prohibit generations of people from smoking tobacco is completely laughable. I mean, all it will do is it will drive the sale of tobacco underground, and consumers will simply buy tobacco on the unregulated black market, which means they will be exposed to all sorts of illicit tobacco. We don't know where it comes from. They'll also be exposed to counterfeit tobacco, which is potentially even more dangerous than existing tobacco. And of course, the government will lose a huge amount of revenue that they make in tobacco taxation. Now, there might be a lot of non-smokers watching this who will think this type of policy won't affect them, but it will affect them. The government has to start taxing something they enjoy in order to make up that lost revenue.
Absolutely. I mean, so just talk me through this exact policy then. So anyone who's currently aged 14 or under now will never be able to go and buy tobacco. So that age limit will always increase. So there could be a time when a man in his 40s, in looking in the future, has to go and get a man who's in his 50s to go and buy him a deck of fags.
Absolutely. That's why it's so laughable. I mean, we've worked out that if you're 32 in New Zealand in 2040, you will be allowed to buy tobacco. But if you're 1 year younger, if you're 31, you'll be committing a crime and you could face serious penalties. Now, you know, it's absolutely absurd because you're creating a two-tier society, not distinguishing between children and adults, but distinguishing between different groups of adults. It makes absolutely no sense at all. And I would very much hope that any politician in the UK who might conceivably be thinking of promoting a similar policy in the UK in order to reach this ludicrous smoke-free 2030 target, I very much hope they will think again and not even go down that route.
It's astonishing that a government would even propose this kind of stuff. Where do they get off? Where do they get off telling us actually what we can and can't do to a large extent with our lives? You know, it's all very well and good, you know, managing the economy for us. It's all very well and good running our health service. I mean, there's question marks over how well that gets done from time to time. It's all very well and good, you know, keeping the roads flowing and this, that and the other. Your usual government stuff. What right has any government got to tell me that I can't smoke?
Well, it's interesting because I'm not a smoker, but I do feel very strongly that smokers have been very badly treated over the last 15, 20 years. I accept that there are very serious health risks associated with smoking, and it's very important that if you're going to smoke, you make an informed decision to smoke and you're well aware about the serious health risks. But you're right, over the last 20, perhaps 30 years, there has been an increasing sort of drive within politics, within politicians, to dictate how we live our lives. It's gone beyond sort of the economy, armed forces, all these sort of things. Now politicians want to dictate the minutiae of how we live our lives. And I think a lot of non-smokers need to be watching what's happening to smokers. It started with the smoking ban, where overnight, smoking was banned in every single pub and private members club in the country. And it's gone on since then. We've had graphic health warnings, we've had plain packaging, we've had the display ban, we've had the ban on menthol cigarettes, which of course was another step towards what we call creeping prohibition. And once politicians are finished with smoking, they'll move on to something else. I mean, we think they'll almost certainly move on to vaping because they don't just want this country to be smoke-free, they want it to be nicotine-free. But then are they going to start dictating exactly what we eat and what we drink? We are moving in, I have to say, a rather draconian direction. And although I'm not an anti-vaxxer, I've been vaxxed, I've had my booster, so I'm not against vaccination. I supported the initial lockdowns. But you do see that politicians are getting a taste of power, of control. And I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist because I'm not. But I do think that we need to reevaluate what is the role of politicians and how far should they intervene in people's private lives.
And that's, of course, relevant not just to this smoking issue, but lots of issues as well relating to COVID at the moment. So very relevant conversation there. But Simon Clark, thanks for joining us this morning, Director of the Smokers Group Forest.
Indeed. Yes, well, what are your views on all of this stuff? GBviews at gbnews.uk. Still flooding in thick and fast your comments regarding the elderly. It's going to be announced that the Captain Sir Tom Moore Foundation, along with Esther Ranson, of course, are going to be, well, they're looking at basically doing a Captain Sir Tom Moore Day. So basically it's going to be like a Children in Need event, but for the elderly, and I think that's fantastic stuff. So his legacy lives on. Now, Patrick, thank you for highlighting the plight of our elderly. There was a really, yeah, here we go, Andy. Thank you very much, Andy, for getting in touch. I was making the point that a lot of old people in this country just get a really raw deal, right? And you're saying, I'm sat in a winter coat and a woolly hat with 2 pairs of socks and gloves on. This is, I believe, in Nottinghamshire. In 2 weeks' time, my family will visit and I want it to be warm for them. So the implication there, I suppose, Andy, is that, you know, unfortunately can't, you know, he's got to choose, hasn't he, between keeping himself warm now or keeping his family warm when they visit. Look, Andy, obviously, all the best to you. I would dare say, without knowing too much about Andy's personal circumstances, he's paid into a system his whole life, probably.
Yeah, and there will be lots of people in this country who share the same experience, I suppose, as Andy. And it is very unfortunate that I feel there's a growing number of people in this country. This is just purely anecdotal. But I feel there is a growing number of people in this country who feel their life has got worse under a Conservative government, considerably worse. And whether or not that's because of things beyond the Conservative Party's control or not, they will very much still be associating this government with a period where their lives became much worse, which is a shame.
No, indeed. And I just think, you know, it is a very tricky time to get old in this country, all too often marginalised and forgotten. I think we only have to look at what happened with the care home scandal, and it was a scandal, really, I think, that when the COVID crisis kicked off. I think, unfortunately, from what I could see, they were seen just as simply as some kind of dry kindling at the start of this coronavirus crisis, and I just think that's desperately, desperately sad. But anyway, after the break, scientists have discovered a new planet orbiting a 2-star system, something previously thought impossible. So join us for the full story and why it is such an unexpected phenomenon. But before that, start your morning's headlines.
I'm Olivia Guthrie. Here are the latest headlines. The Cabinet Secretary will now investigate 3 alleged parties in Downing Street and Whitehall during lockdown last year. Cabinet Minister Michael Ellis says they're looking into several claims. He also says the Cabinet Office will liaise with police if anything illegal is uncovered. The investigation follows a leaked video showing Number 10 staff laughing about restrictions just days after one of the alleged events. Boris Johnson is facing a revolt from Tory backbenchers who are questioning the government's credibility in enforcing England's Plan B COVID rules. New rules include extending mandatory masks to indoor public venues such as cinemas and theatres, and guidance to work from home, where possible, will be returning on Monday. The Conservative Party has been fined almost £18,000 over the redecoration of Boris Johnson's Downing Street flat. The Electoral Commission says it failed to accurately report a donation and keep a proper accounting record. A party spokesman said they were considering an appeal. Meanwhile, Boris Johnson and his wife Carrie have announced the birth of a baby girl at a London hospital earlier today. It's the couple's second child after the birth of their son Wilfred in April 2020. A spokeswoman said both mother and daughter are doing very well. You're right up to date. I'll be back with more on all today's main stories at the top of the hour.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
GBviews at gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Well, yes, a 4-day police operation involving 8 police forces is underway in Ipswich to target organised crime on the roads.
Yes, under Prime Minister Boris Johnson's new plans to clamp down on county lines gangs, operations like this one in the East region will receive millions of pounds in funding in the next 3 years. Well, our East of England reporter Amelia Harper attended the operation.
All right, thanks very much.
A multi-agency regional crackdown on organised crime is taking place in Ipswich. The aim to disrupt criminals who operate across county borders using the roads. Under the Prime Minister's new plans to target organised criminals, county lines and drugs, the number of disruptions like this one will increase by 20% in the next 3 years. 2,000 county lines will be dismantled using £300 million. The head of this regional operation says it is a realistic target for police.
I think it's aspirational, but which is what we should be working towards, but it's going to take multi-agency response along with police forces working together collaboratively to deal with this sort of crime on our roads. The biggest challenges that we face is the intelligence around who's doing what, making sure that intelligence is fresh, making sure it's valuable.
Over 100 vehicles possibly involved in crime will be stopped by teams from 8 regional police forces. Checks will be carried out, including drugs testing if police suspect they're being used or transported. One of the plans is that testing is going to be expanded upon arrest, and individuals that are found to be doing or involved in drugs will be pointed by police towards relevant interventions. Do you feel that's your job, or perhaps something more to do with healthcare? And how is this going to affect the work that you do?
It's everybody's job to provide the recommendations, and I think that's something that we've experienced over many years of dealing with county lines, is the inability of one agency to deal with it in isolation. So in terms of what we're trying to do and what the government's announced, then there's lots of opportunities for the government agencies to work together to deal with this issue.
As part of the plans, when dealers are arrested by police, police are then able possibly to seize their phones and message their clients to try to discourage drug use. Do you think this could blur the lines between you taking action on criminality and then becoming possibly complicit in it?
It's an interesting one. I'm not sure how that would work, but ultimately the responsibility of the police is to prevent and detect crime. So anything that we can do, new ideas that are preventative, as well as that detection and that investigation of crime, is welcome.
During disruptions like this, police say the extra funding will help to break up organised criminals operating across different counties. They hope the new measures will help them clamp down on individuals, but also on larger scale organised crime over the next 3 years. Amelia Harper, GB News, Ipswich.
Now, in October 2008, Jamal Khashoggi, a US-based Saudi journalist, 2018, and prominent critic of Saudi Arabia's government, walked into the Saudi consulate in Istanbul and never walked out. The journalist was brutally murdered, and his killing was widely covered, intensifying global criticisms of the government in Riyadh.
Well, on Tuesday, police sources stated that one of the suspects had been arrested. Well, we can now report that this was a case of mistaken identity, apparently, and the man in question has now been released. Gosh.
Yes, which is... so we brought you this yesterday, and we actually spoke to somebody about the significance of this. There were 26 suspects there was, and they, as we've just said there, mistakenly arrested somebody. It was a case of mistaken identity. So it's basically back to square one now, isn't it? It'll be quite a blow to his family and friends, won't it?
I mean, I find this quite difficult to understand how this has happened, because you would imagine there's a huge police operation that must have gone into monitoring this individual, finding him, tracking them down, you know, considering who it was. And then obviously they swoop and they get them, and it turns out they've just got the wrong bloke completely. I mean, it does just start to make you wonder, maybe realistically, lots of people just don't know what happened, in a way. Or exactly what happened anyway, or anything like that. But
or it just speaks to, you know, the competence of the...
French authorities.
Yeah, which is something you speak a lot about, isn't it?
Well, absolutely, yes. Well, at least he managed to detain one person at this time, even if it was the wrong guy, I suppose. But there we go. Yeah, no, and also as well, it just highlighted the very worst elements of the Saudi regime, didn't it? I mean, you know, that's where they're at, which is if there's any opposition whatsoever, then they can just execute you, can't they? Really?
Yeah, absolutely. But moving on to something happier, the family of Captain Sir Tom Moore are looking to set up an annual day to honour the NHS fundraiser. Captain Tom's family have said that Captain Tom Day would be like a Children in Need for older people and would revolutionise the way society thinks about ageing.
Yes, indeed. Well, that's the point of it. It will encourage people to raise funds to tackle loneliness and isolation among the elderly. Captain Sir Tom Moore, who sadly passed away at the age of 100 in February, raised almost £40 million for our NHS charities by walking around his garden during the first lockdown. Do you remember they even did a bit of a flyover for him, didn't they?
Yeah, there was that magnificent cover as well. I think it was in GQ magazine of him just draped in a Union Jack, and it was just the best, really, of British. He was the best of British, and he should be honoured in every way possible.
And when he got knighted, obviously, he met the Queen, and she you know, gave him the tap, and then they had a quick chat, the sword tap, and they had a quick chat, and afterwards they went to, oh, go on, what did the Queen say to you? What did the Queen? And he was like, that's between me and the Queen. And I've always thought, I just think that's so lovely.
Yeah, well, earlier, the Great British Breakfast here on GB News spoke to Captain Tom's daughter, Hannah Ingram Moore. They began by asking her about her father and older people more generally, many of whom feel invisible.
Tragically, my mother died in her 60s, and she was the love of his life. And he watched her demise over many years through the tragedy of dementia and Alzheimer's. And I have to say, though, in that time, of course, he had the network of other carers, the doctors and nurses. And although he was grieving, he had other people around him. And then she died, and there was nothing. And he felt, I think, for the first time in his life that he'd aged and people were looking through him and past him. Shortly afterwards, we moved you know that my father came to live with us. And it was just a little while after that he said to me, Hannah, I had become invisible to the world. In my head, I feel the same, but what people see is something else, and you've given me my visibility back. By 2036, 1 in 4 of the population will be 65 or over. If we don't change the way we perceive it, look what the tragedy that will happen already. We have older people who are seen and not heard, and also are tragically lonely and isolated. We seriously feel that the legacy of my father allows us, we hope, to just have this positive impact on society. And we've been working really hard to hope that we can find the thing that we can do in his honour. And this feels like it. If we can just change the perceptions just a little bit, that would be incredible. You know, in a little way, I can understand the feeling for any woman who's gone on maternity leave and come back to work. You feel that you've lost your confidence, that perhaps people don't perceive you in the same way. Imagine that emotion, but as an older person where you feel a little disengaged from the rest of the world, especially in this high-tech, fast-moving world. It's our responsibility to give them a voice, to champion them. We want to celebrate and empower them, and really importantly, connect the generations, because that's how he lived in the last 13 years of his life, and he understood the power of that connectivity of generations. Well, of course, what a great collaboration. We're truly honoured. And, you know, I met the wonderful Dame Esther Ranson, and when she was saying that she felt she'd failed in her life to bring awareness to older people, only a tiny percentage of money raised by charity goes towards older people. I believe it's 2%, although I need to check that figure. It's woefully small, and we have the poorest older people in Europe, which is a real scandal. And so Dame Esther has tried really hard to shine the light, and she felt that she wasn't getting anywhere. And we just by chance met. And this collaboration, I think, is going to be incredible. We will give a voice to our ageing population. We will give a voice, empower them and show their wisdom. And collaborating with her, it gives huge energy and focus to what we're doing, culminating from fundraising over the next few months to the Captain Tom Day in mid-June next year.
Well, that's fantastic, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would urge everybody to get behind that when it launches eventually. Yeah, I'm sure they'll raise lots and lots of money, and it'd be interesting because children in need is a bit of a cultural phenomenon here, isn't it? Or Red Nose Day or things like that, and obviously they're all geared towards helping children and helping people in poverty abroad. So it's, I think, a really good time, probably long overdue for something similar. I
agree.
For our older people.
I agree, as you said as well. We've got an ageing population. You know, it'll come to us all one day, ladies and gentlemen. So we might as well try and get something set up now. I think, you know what? I think there'll be an outpouring for this as well. I really do think there'll be a massive groundswell, and hopefully we can do a bit more to help treat our old people a bit better. But anyway, new photographs show a planet orbiting around a 2-star system, something that was thought to be impossible until now.
Yes, B Centauri, which I might have pronounced wrong, but our guest might be able to correct me in a second, is around 325 million light years away and can be seen with the naked eye. And astronomers spotted the planet orbiting the stellar couple at 100 times the distance from Jupiter to the Sun. And some astronomers believed planets could not exist around stars this massive and this hot until now.
Gosh. Well, anyway, I'm fascinated by this kind of stuff. So, Deputy Executive Director at Royal Astronomical Society, Robert Massey, is with us now. Thank you very much, Robert. What on earth does this mean?
Well, look, it's a curiosity and it challenges our ideas about planets. What you have to remember, I think, is that 30 years ago, which doesn't seem that long ago to me, we didn't know about any planets around other stars at all. We thought they were there because it would seem really odd that the Earth, the planets in the solar system were unique, but we didn't know for sure. And then from the mid-1990s onwards, we've discovered literally thousands of them. So it probably isn't surprising that you start to see these really odd cases like this one. And the challenge is, well, really hot stars have a short life. They chuck out a lot of heat and radiation and blast their surroundings. So how do you get something like a planet forming there? And the idea is maybe One idea is that it formed like a sort of low mass star, there wasn't enough matter to form a star, just gas collapsing in, and you ended up with a planet. But yeah, it's intriguing. I mean, it's not, in case you wonder, could anything live there? No, it's extremely unlikely. It's made too massive. The star's really unpleasant as a place for life to exist. So that's not the case. Could we go there even? Well, 325 light years away, that would be a bit of a challenge as well. But it is intriguing, and it does demonstrate, too, the power of the telescopes that we use now.
Yeah. Why is it? I'm staggered that 30 years ago we didn't even know, we didn't have evidence of anything like this. Why is it that astronomy and the space sector manages to evolve and innovate so quickly? Because I'm staggered by the fact that they can even identify things like this when I can't even get a bit of 4G sometimes in central London.
Yeah,
how do they do it?
Well, I think the answer is that they are great innovators. That, I've been working in this field for many years. People are used to eking out everything. So you take something like a telescope and you push it to its absolute limit. And the way you can do that is either to build a bigger telescope to collect more light and see things more clearly, or you can build ever more sensitive detectors. And both of those things have happened in a huge way in the last 3 or 4 decades. And of course, we also did things like put the Hubble telescope in space to get above the Earth's atmosphere and avoid all the problems that brings. So the innovation is really powerful because they want to push things to a level that you don't need mostly on Earth. But we do see really amazing benefits. I mean, for example, radio astronomers were responsible for developing Wi-Fi. You sit there thinking, how could we manage without Wi-Fi now? At least most of us. And that was a tool that was developed for radio astronomy to help them work their observatory better. Things like all the image processing, things like the cameras you've got on your smartphones and so on, were at least in part driven by the efforts of people like astronomers to get ever better imaging.
Fantastic stuff. I mean, look, I honestly could just talk to you about this all day, every day. I've got a couple of questions, but I am just going to start with one before we run out of time. Do you think we've ever been visited by aliens?
No.
No?
I don't.
Oh, OK, all right.
And the reason I don't is that I think, this is not some lightweight thing. I mean, people, yeah, of course there are people who claim all these kind of things, but there's absolutely no hard evidence for it whatsoever. Look, it would be really fascinating to find evidence of life elsewhere in the universe, and we haven't done it yet, really, despite enormous efforts. There is that sort of hint of something in the atmosphere of Venus that was announced last year, but even that is tentative, and it's just a chemical that might be associated with life. So it's really, really difficult to find life elsewhere in the universe. It sadly isn't just turning up.
Do you think, though, just very lastly now, what do you think, there will be some great big groundbreaking discoveries over the course of the next 30 years? If we're this far along now, hopefully, fingers crossed, if I can keep going in the course of the rest of my lifetime, do you think we will discover some form of life out there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm optimistic about that in the sense I think what you'd be looking at probably is one of these planets that's a bit more like the Earth, so a lot smaller, round a star that's a bit more like the Sun, so cooler and more pleasant, and, a better place for life to thrive. We might just detect the signature of something in one of the atmospheres of one of those planets that hints strongly at life. And that would be great, wouldn't it? I remember saying this in about 2000, maybe we could expect it within 20 years. Clearly that didn't happen. But maybe in the next 20 years, we will see that discovery. And if we don't, it opens up some really big questions as well about just how unique the Earth really is. Gosh, absolutely. Fascinating stuff. I mean, it really is. I'll have to get you back on. Yeah. Hopefully we get another discovery at some point soon and we can get you back on the show. So thank you very much for that, Deputy Executive Director there at the Royal Astronomical Society, Robert Massey.
Yes, very fascinating stuff. And let's finish, as promised, with some of your views, GBNews at gbnews.uk.
Absolutely, yes. I was, of course, prepared for this. So, yes, loads of you have been getting in touch. The elderly that we were talking about there as well. The golden oldies, as Mark has called them. Just saying that old people old people are obviously very lonely. I've had this on my mind for a long time. They're a postwoman, actually, in Newham in East London, and I see on a daily basis how lonely these people are. They just want someone to talk to. So now this is the news, of course, that the elderly hopefully are going to kind of get their own day, really, and it will come fundraise and hopefully get care. Because, look, as well, just quickly, we talk a lot about increasing the care and NHS packages, etc., etc., etc. But that really just gets gobbled up by the NHS, doesn't it? Not caring the community and elderly care, you know. So maybe we do need to start funding it ourselves.
Yeah, to be honest, I think local charities do a much better job at dealing with lots of social issues, way more than the big state does. So I think I would always encourage people to maybe donate and help out whatever local initiatives that are taking place. And Silver Line, of course, which is like a line that connects people with elderly people who might be feeling lonely as well. So that's one option to go for as well if you want to help out with elderly people in loneliness.
Yes, indeed. Well, look, that's it from us here at To The Point, but don't go away because very shortly we're going to be joined by Gloria Di Piero for The Briefing. So stay tuned. Thank you very much, everyone.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. There's some wet weather around for all of us this evening, but for most of the day, much of central and eastern Britain dry and bright this afternoon. But in the west, we'll start to see the cloud thickening